to concepts. And obviously those are going to vary from place to place. So in places you may feel as though the knowledge is already quite high about a given issue, and other places you may feel that it's not really that high. Some of these things you might want to introduce actually into a program design module, but in some cases you may not need to introduce them into a program design module because you might have already done those units. So what I thought was that at the beginning people talked about there were definitely some organizational considerations. Yeah? So good governance structures relating to community learning programs, how you would manage volunteers, and we could start to include samples of volunteer contracts as an item that you would be able to do rather than necessarily a training unit. Obviously case studies and examples of documents will also be useful. Editorial considerations, there were a series of kind of introductions to different concepts. There was an area that people talked about in terms of doing program planning, work that you would need to do before you started to think about design, how you identify partners for collaboration, formative research, identifying target audiences. Clearly there are a lot of gaps here, but what I tried to do is just to stick with the list that we had rather than adding a lot of other things. Then there were definitely elements that related to the actual design of a program, from using the message matrix, program matrix, understanding appropriate media formats, gender considerations, budgeting and cost analysis, planning, monitoring and evaluation, production skills, which is probably an area where we don't necessarily have to write a lot of units on our own, but maybe perhaps point more to people that training materials that you think will be particularly useful, because obviously these kind of formats are different. So interviewing, it's not necessarily just general interviewing, but some specific interviewing skills, particularly around how you interview community members, rather than just experts, or thinking about journalism styles of more journalistic styles of interviewing. Presentation, field recording, multi-channel, and thinking about off-air activities. So some of these could be delivered in, could be combined into a week-long training program where you would draw on different modules and different units to be able to do something, and some of them I think might be standalone. Considerations around sustainability. And I think it's probably a good example, and monitoring and evaluation is also a good example, that while there may be a need to actually do a one-day or even a 2-day workshop for groups that have never thought about it, if that seems to be their priority, that can be, I think, kind of a standalone module. At the same time, when you come to do a program design process, you do have to consider those things, and you're not going to have a whole day. So you're going to need some kind of a unit that you'll be able to do in a fairly short period of time. That's not going to be really so much around understanding or introducing concepts, but actually how you deliver a manageable plan for monitoring and evaluating that program in a short period of time. And the same for sustainability. You may want to do something at the outset where we start to think about getting people to think right at the very beginning, well, whose needs is this program trying to serve, and how does that lead in towards a plan for sustainability. But when you come to doing a program development workshop, you are going to have to think about budgeting and cost analysis. And in a sense, that needs to be a much more practical application of that kind of a sustainability module. But I think that's what you were kind of building into your presentation earlier. Yeah. Mm. Some of the things are a little bit duplicated. I think my numbering in it.
So,
yeah. So anyway, I tried to start to group those things together and think about what kind of a process there would be. Yep.
Yeah, I think the understanding and the blended approaches.
Yeah.
I think it overlaps with the off-air activities.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and then I have a problem with both terms actually, because off-air activities sounds a sort as if it's not an equal part of what you're doing of the program, and a blended approach.
Suggestions?
A multimedia approach or something,
okay.
Because theater is also a medium.
Right, yeah.
And so are the other ones, something like that, I don't know.